Apple and Samsung's lawsuit is being sent back to the district courts. Samsung might be secretly showing off a bendable phone at MWC. If the iPhone 8 or iPhone X costs over $1,000, might an expensive OLED display be to blame? And what's the deal with this new proprietary made-for-iPhone connector? These stories, and we'll answer your viewer questions, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 239 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Well, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile, smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and every phone had its own proprietary charger. Ah, the good old days. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, blasting this signal from another about-to-be rainy night in Southern California. I'm loving all of this weather that we've been getting. Joined, as always, by plucky podcast producer, Mr. Jules Wong. How's it going, buddy boy?
Well, I would say that would more apply to mobile gaming consoles, whereas phones just used about every single micro USB connector standard that was available, and yet, you couldn't plug one into another anyway.
Well, this is definitely where
it's just there's so many different types.
The age disparity is working out in your favor, because when I started getting into cell phones, no one was using micro USB. We had those weird dock style connectors, we had pin barrel connectors, we had prong connectors, and when micro USB started taking over for things like pocket PCs, that was a revelation. We no longer had to buy
slots. Were those a thing in mobile phones?
Yes, they were. Actually, that was the first way that you could make a smartphone, was taking an iPack, what was it, a 3630, get one of the connector sleeves on it, and slot in some kind of GSM PCMCIA card, and that would give you mobile internet. Would it even give you data? I don't remember if it would even give you data, but you could make phone calls off of that, and it was super exciting to be able to have your Outlook and your phone in one gigantic brick of a device. It was like the size of in my brain, it was the size of a Lumia 1520, but I'm sure it was actually much, much smaller. And I just remember it being this huge thing. Oh, a 4-inch screen. Who could walk around with something that big?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what half of that what you said was, but I'm just enjoying the power of the hair dryer that's going on in the bathroom right next door that is blocking the Wi-Fi signal. So, yeah, continue on. Let's see if we can hold out for it, or the hair.
That's a pretty powerful hair dryer if it's blocking your Wi-Fi's, man. That's some powerful stuff.
That's why I'm going to leave it on. That's why I'm leaving it on. But in the meantime, you can talk to us in your hair dryer at the same time, if it doesn't affect your internet, by through onto Twitter and sort of the PN Weekly hashtag. And while we're broadcasting on air, you'll be following us and tracking something that's.
I think I'm starting to lose you, bud. But to follow off on what you're saying, definitely join that conversation using the PN Weekly hashtag. And if you're one of those people who are listening to us on the higher quality audio version where Jules doesn't break up as much because it's all pre-recorded audio, you can send us a message using the email address podcast@pocketnow.com. We actually have what I think is one of the most fun emails we've ever gotten that we'll be tackling at the end of the show. And already on Twitter, I'm seeing, I see Chamfered Edges dropped us a little shout out hello before we got started. He looks like he's going to be going to school, which is probably a much better use of your time than watching us stream this live, is getting your education. And Mr. Ed Modlin at Tech Files joining us this week, as always. Some great commentary from Ed. Definitely give him a follow on Twitter. I think he posts some really fun stuff. And Dante Tyson Hibbler is shouting us out with the PN Weekly hashtag. So I'm glad to see him here. He says, "Oh, the good old days of sub 5-inch screen devices." I just it's so funny kind of trekking back and remembering that we used to try and do all of this smartphone style stuff on sub 3-inch screens with tiny little styluses that would telescope out of weird ports on our giant super bricky phones, and that was the bleeding edge of mobile technology.
Are we still on about old smartphones from when I was not born, or are we going to talk about the modern smartphones? Because the hair dryer has let up, and all of a sudden the internet's starting to flow again. So I want to make sure that we
That's
get,
actually really hilarious that that the hair
and now it's
dryer
back
was
on.
disrupting the electricity of that circuit so badly that
It's back on now.
that's awesome.
All right. I'm going to pretend that this is going to work out. Let's see if we sound.
We'll see. So, kicking things off, I think it's probably most exciting to start with maybe the big money, the big ticket item. It's rumors on the next iPhone price. What are we calling this? The iPhone X? Is that what Jaime's been calling it for the daily? Something like that?
Yeah, that's been one of the rumored names. It's likely going to be the iPhone 8. The money, the good money is on the iPhone 8, but with it being the decennial iPhone, that would be also a good name for it. But then again, you could just call it the iPhone M, because if we're going to be talking about price here, you might have to shell above that $1,000 mark in order to be able to take advantage
Woo!
of pretty interesting specs here. And these specs have been told up before in many different little rumors. So this little capsule from Fast Company is just maybe recapping it. There may be a few developments here that I might have not caught, but overall, we're just going to run this down. 5.8-inch OLED screen that wraps around the entire face of the display. Apparently, it's going to cost twice as much as a typical LCD from Sharp or JDI.
I'm
or
actually
any
not
other.
horribly surprised by that this new wraparound OLED would be significantly
Really?
more expensive than an LCD.
Well, I mean, there has been talk about LCDs and LEDs coming into price parity, but I'm not sure what form factors those were. I'm assuming those are going to be in the anywhere from like laptop size to small TV size. But then again, when we're talking about the mobile industry, we're like between the Galaxy S and
And I don't know if that's you or me, but you went
these
freeze frame.
small
You
Chinese
back?
players. That's I mean, I'm back. I'm back. I
Okay,
hope. I mean, yeah,
no, but
it's kind of
what I was
hard
gonna
hard
say
to
what I
come
was
through.
gonna say about the iPhone 8, if we're talking about again, why people seem to be so concerned or so anxious that this is going to be a more expensive screen. I mean, Apple has stuck for 2 years now with a 5.5-inch 1080p LCD, and it's definitely improved. You know, the quality of the screen has improved. Talking about a type of display technology that I don't think is so boundary pushing or so boundary leading, even in just in terms of the resolution of the display, the size of the display. I mean, I think this is pretty well worn territory for LCD manufacturers. Yet, a company trying to do a curved OLED at the kind of scale that Apple would need, that I think is probably a much bigger engineering challenge than what Apple has dealt with in the past
And
for the 6 Plus and the
yeah,
6S
I would
Plus and
just
the
say,
7 Plus.
yeah, the OLED industry is really strained because basically it's just Samsung. Like really, other than a
Yeah,
few smaller Chinese players that are started to get their act together, it's just Samsung. And between the Galaxy S8 and the iPhone 8, we're basically talking about all the supply dried up for at least this year, maybe even up till next year. So 2019 is when most of the other competitors are going to be even viable for full on production to satisfy multiple manufacturers, including Apple and
right.
Samsung. So we're kind of in a nightmare situation right now in terms
Well,
of
that's actually one of
this
the things that I
glut.
wanted to ask you, Jules, is do we really think that this is going to be some kind of nightmare scenario? Or is it more likely that a move like this could position Apple into this is a premium product. It's a higher price tag, and people are going to be impressed by that. And so we'll actually have an iPhone that is once again a status symbol. When people look at that iPhone and, not everyone can go and get it because it's so expensive. Isn't that kind of right up Apple's alley? Like, isn't that something that they do well?
I would argue that was the iPhone 7 Plus. Everyone seems to gravitate towards. I mean, we've seen this in the earnings report and the talk about it from financial analysts that say, oh, the iPhone 7 Plus seemed to have more of the iPhone 7 generation wasn't really that mind-blowing to consumers, but of features that consumers seem to be gravitating towards, those were only found in the iPhone 7 Plus, and more sales of that generation were, the growth of it was found in the iPhone 7 Plus and the Plus model. So this being a third factor, we're talking about iPhone 7s, iPhone 7s Plus, in addition to this iPhone 8, and those two would be more of an iteration from the iPhone 7, is kind of it's wow. I think Juan just got kicked out of the call. Either that or
I don't know what you're talking about. I was here the whole time.
Is Google just having fun with us?
Yeah, Hangouts is and I'm getting the pop-up. Google Effects apps will no longer work after April 25th. So they're already telling us about how their product here is actively working against us.
I shouldn't be blaming the
when it kicked me out, I was like, I hope Jules just keeps talking, because I should be able to flip right back in again. This will be exciting to see if we can pull that off.
No, we got to expose this for the thing it is, because this has been a long-running historical.
And for those of you, I know we've gotten a couple complaints that there have been issues with Jules' audio and with my audio, that it went a little staticky there. And again, like, we get no notification on this. There's no way for us to hear that anything's wrong. And if you go and you listen to the high quality version that we record locally, and then we sort of paste the two audio feeds together, everything sounds great. So we definitely appreciate it when you guys let us know. It's like, there's not really a whole lot we can do to fix Google Hangouts for Google.
Pocketnow.com. I mean, we're right there, and you have the access to our feeds. You can look it up. Our Google Play Music has podcasts now. We're on that. iTunes, we're on that. Like, blow our numbers up there so that we don't have to, like,
although I think it's just for those of you, whether or not we even keep this little exchange in the finished version of the podcast, which I think we should, because I think it's hilarious. But for those of you who get to watch us live, oh no, totally. But for those of you who watch us live, I think the novelty is watching, like, how will the stream fall apart this week, and then we can move on from there, which is awesome.
We talked about pizza once while we were at the studios at my old college station, WERS, and immediately Google decided to kick each member of the video chat out. So the stream was actually, like, it had nothing for a second before all three of us started coming back in.
That's awesome.
So that was an interesting tale. Where were we in terms of this iPhone 8? There was a whole lot more memory upgrades, Qualcomm and Intel doing modems again. They're sharing them as opposed to Qualcomm taking the whole of the order. Stainless steel mid-frame with glass caps. I'm just trying to get through this so that we can talk about. Also, in addition to, like, the home button going away, we might see the volume controls replaced with, like, a capacitive, little strip at the side. Dimensional scanning, we've been talking about face scanners, iris scanners, whatever scanning. Maybe this 3D scanning technology could also enhance dual cameras for augmented reality, and also better resolution in general. The production outline will be about, the typical line would be about 100,000 test runs, starting at the beginning of this year, and then going through until May, when the actual orders come up, and then August will be the full-blown production, like, madness going on.
Yeah.
So between three models, and we saw the iPhone 7 Plus basically just totally screw up in terms of supply. There was not enough supply to go around, and people were waiting weeks on months for that
Right.
to come around. And given sort of the supply constraints around OLED right now and other just all these things, like it just seems like the industry, with Apple being its head house, just kind of growing beyond its
But
bounds,
unlike
its
what we saw,
sustainability.
no, unlike what we saw with the iPhone 7, where really from the iPhone 6 to through the 6S to the iPhone 7, the only major differences were color. I mean, if you hold a gold iPhone 7 against a gold iPhone 6S, most people at arm's length would probably not be able to tell the difference between those phones. So really, I mean, like the most constrained model was the new color, or the new matte black and jet black iPhones. Those are the ones that took the longest to actually make it back into the shipping, into the product queue. And so I kind of think, with
Mm.
Apple actually, what appears to be Apple making a larger play at changing up the form factor, changing up the visual look, the design, the style of the phone, and then slapping that ridiculous price tag on it. I kind of feel like that actually will prove to be a positive move for Apple. It's going to have that a more legitimate air of exclusivity than the iPhone 7 Plus jet black edition did, where it was just like, oh, we can't build enough of them. This is like, it's going to have such the high price tag where only a certain
Well,
tier of customer would be, like sort of considering this phone anyway. And it's going to have some bleeding edge tech for an iPhone that makes it, difficult to get or to acquire on both ends. And I think that'll feel like a more legitimate premium luxury exclusive item. Kind of like when we did see people were actually sporting, like Apple Watch Edition, stuff like that, where that tends to somehow work in Apple's favor. And they're the only company that can really pull a move off like that. If Samsung dropped, $1,000 phone, you'd have to see a number of bells and whistles. And like the Note got close, but it didn't crest that $1,000 price point.
well, yeah. In terms of the jet black thing, I mean, we also have to remember that it was tied to 128 gigabytes and above, not the base 32 gigabytes. So there was a vanity element, but there was also the fact that you were paying for more memory as well,
Yeah.
and that was kind
But
of
but
the
I
way
just mean
to
like
whittle
in
things
terms of
down.
the manufacturing there, I don't think that the jet black iPhone 7 felt as much like an exclusive device as like the very first iPhone did, and I think Apple stands to get closer to the feel of something truly exclusive, a truly premium luxury lifestyle piece of consumer electronics that I think the iPhone 7, regardless of color, just failed to meet that kind of excitement. It sells really well. It's still a very popular phone. People bought them regardless of not having a headphone jack, but it didn't strike into that temperament of something, like really, like a fine piece of jewelry or a nice watch or something like that. And I think Apple actually could
Well,
pull off something. I mean, from a business perspective, not necessarily from a tech fan perspective, but from a business perspective, which could be a lot more exciting than what they did in 2016.
well, I think it's Apple's running a three-leg race here, and you know how awkward those things can be in terms of having those like the two, like the one shared leg and then the two side legs supporting it. This isn't the original iPhone. This is not, $500 on, $500 on contract,
Right.
and it's just one of them. We're talking about a mature market with three iPhones, two of them, iterations, and one of them is kind of like the mid, let's like luxury and more advanced, but not quite. You have so you have to wonder where people will settle, especially with that psychological four-digit mark possibly playing into buying decisions here. So like, there are tons of things to weigh out. I'm not interested in weighing them out just yet. Uh, we'll probably have to see if China, with President Donald Trump, takes any um, fun with
Yeah,
China
that's
in
true.
terms of bringing up
I just mean,
prices.
I think you look at $1,000 iPhone and it's probably not going to be up any of our alleys. But if I look up the current collection of Louis Vuitton handbags and see $4,000 and $5,000 purses, $1,000 iPhone I think would fit in really well with a $3,800 handbag. You know, so I think that's what we're talking about. We got a tweet here
I'm not sure how
from
big
Patrick
that
J.
audience is where they throw away the value proposition, but yeah.
Well, but if you're buying a $3,800 handbag, what value proposition conversation are you really having? You're
I mean,
you're
in terms
buying
of the whole
status.
the whole pool, yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
But from Patrick J, I think he agrees with me. He says Apple wants to be a status symbol, and look at that Beats acquisition again. Whether or not you really, what kind of value you put on Beats products, there's definitely a name and a branding exercise at play there. And then he hopes we both are able to stay connected, as I'm still not entirely sure that this broadcast will last for all of our news pieces here. So hopefully we
I'm
can keep
just
this
I'm just
ship
gonna
afloat.
just charge on here. But there was also been talk, more Trump talk about bringing iPhone manufacturing to the U.S. and how it's going to cost a couple $100s, and analysts
Yeah.
have been suggesting, hey, why not make a iPhone made in the U.S. edition and then charge a couple $100 more for that? Can we apply status? Are we just going to build more statuses to everything? Like, you can
I
definitely make the whole can
yeah,
extend itself.
I definitely agree with that point, and especially back to your point about this being a pretty well saturated market. The flagship phone market is pretty well decided in a lot of first world countries. This actually comes from Ed Modlin, PN Weekly. I just hope in the quest to be different, Apple doesn't pull a Vertu. And that's actually the flip side to my point is if they don't land this ship just right, if they don't find that emotional argument to get people to part with their cash before the rational part of their brain kicks over, then yeah, people are gonna point to this, and then it'll be an albatross around Apple's neck, not something that lifts the whole ship up.
I mean, as long as I don't hear Swarovski or something like that tied with this thing, then we're pretty good.
Well,
We're pretty
well,
all right.
one of the reasons why I'm a little nervous and why I feel like we might hear Swarovski is in talking about the technology side of this. Apple doesn't have the best reputation for sort of their forward vision of the future, their dongles and their adapters and all that fun stuff. And we're getting word that Apple might be launching a new, specifically built for iPhone proprietary connector, which isn't really a proprietary connector. It's a connector that some camera manufacturers are using, but Apple's approach to using it will be proprietary. So none of those cables will work with this new accessories port. And I don't see any benefit to this. This to me sort of reeks of modular phone 2.0, where you'll have to buy accessories just for one model of a phone and they won't be compatible with anything else. And this won't really deliver anything better than what Lightning or USB-C is already capable of.
I mean, Apple's telling us, oh, there's nothing to look at here. Don't worry about it. And there's always this sense, this mission creep of, all right, we're going to convert everyone overnight, basically, and everyone's just waiting for the shoe to drop. But in terms of this connector, it's the Ultra. You got to say Ultra. That
Oh God, I
reflection
don't get it.
accessory connector.
I don't
And
understand
it
this.
takes. I mean, I don't understand it either. The whole, well, we go all the way back to the UCE6 connector that's been used by digital camera manufacturers, and it's a standardized shape, but the pinouts are not the same. They can be proprietary to manufacturers' needs, and it seems like Apple just wants to, brand a new name, or put a new name onto the connector, and then make it,
Right.
for Lightning to UAC, USB-A to UAC, headphone jacks to UAC. Like there's this new standards for, you know, uh, people have been talking about. There's already Lightning, and that's
Yeah.
reversible. Whereas UAC, it has a smaller profile. I'm not sure if that, the smaller profile arguments can be used to
I
justify
Well, and
changing
with the
over to a
with the
whole.
success of USB-C in the Android and for the like 2 Windows phones that are still out there, um, for the success
And
of
MacBook.
USB-C, yeah, well, that's exactly what I was going to get to is the USB-C connector as it relates to USB 3.1 and as it relates to Thunderbolt is a pretty versatile connector. And you have these different pinouts that you can already assign to different things. It's actually one of the problems in Android land right now. If a phone manufacturer gets rid of the headphone jack, we don't have a standardized audio solution for using audio through USB-C. The HTC Bolt does something different than the Moto Play or the Moto Z, I should say. And that's super frustrating. I think that's a terrible way, probably the worst outcome we could have for trying to move to a digital port to display our audio. But it does showcase one of the benefits of that USB-C connector is that you have additional pins that you can play around with for other types of accessories. I'm not sold on modular phones because I don't see anything that modular phones are doing that couldn't be achieved by using some type of accessory clip or connector that utilizes USB-C if we were really using the full OTG spec. And so for Apple to flip this, after pumping up what Lightning was supposed to be, the reversible connector, it's got so much life in it, it can be expanded so well, and then turn around and give us, well, it's smaller. You need a smaller connector for that's the problem is the reversible it's non-reversible and it looks like another type of cable, but you can't buy cheap cables because we changed all the pins, so you still have to buy expensive shoddily made cables from us that'll fall apart after 6 months. That's precisely why
I
people are
think that
frustrated with
takes
Apple right now.
courage.
The courage to milk as much money out of our audience as we possibly can. This is
Uh,
absolutely why people are frustrated with Apple right now. I think Thunderbolt
well,
is the future. And I think if Apple could get ahead of their cabling strategy so that they could really work with their customers to understand, like, you could have one cable to a monitor and USB-C connector to a Lightning connector shouldn't be an expensive cable. For the one Thunderbolt port I have on my laptop, I'm now using it almost exclusively. Almost everything I have, with the exception of a couple of USB flash drives, is now going through some type of USB-C cable. And I went to Monoprice. The cables were stupid cheap. They're really high quality, way better quality than anything Apple's ever put out. And now I'm wishing that my laptop had fewer traditional USB ports and more Thunderbolt ports, because it's just a great flexible interface. But what Apple did with the MacBook, again, it was a little too forward thinking, a little too courageous. And now they don't really have a good unified ecosystem like they used to, where you could pop your headphones from your iPhone to your MacBook. The MacBook still has a headphone jack and your iPhone doesn't. And your USB cable with your iPhone doesn't fit with your MacBook. So you have to go out and buy a replacement. And then if you want a memory card reader, you need a dongle and an adapter and all this other junk. And Apple didn't have to make it this frustrating, this difficult to go through all that. And then for them to be flirting, even the idea of mixing in some other connector now is the most terrible thing they could do for their brand at this moment. Got to let people kind of catch back up to what you're doing with your hardware strategy before you throw them another curveball.
oh heavens to Betsy, no. I just
think
wanted to
it's
say
awful.
that.
I think it's awful.
Well, you know what else is also awful, at least to the Indian government, selling used iPhones
Now, can you
to
walk me
the
through
market.
this? You put this the story up on our schedule for topics today, and this is actually something I've never ever properly understood, why selling used products has been an issue with India specifically.
So India has been growing its under Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been growing a little bit more nationalistic, and it's been encouraging its manufacturers to make in India. That's the campaign that's going on, requiring brands to use 30% parts and labor in India, originating in India, and that's why you see lots of manufacturers from Taiwan and Asia and other places start building plants in India to compensate for that. Apple has partnered with Wistron
Mhm.
to go into India for that. So there's that part of it kind of settled, but needless to say, in a country where the GDP is maybe like 10 times or 10, like only 10% of the price of an iPhone,
Yeah.
like that's it's kind of asking for a little bit much to ask pay 120,000 rupees for an iPhone,
Right.
and that's base model too. So the Apple's trying to see if it can sell used, high quality, refurbished phones in the market. There is a fear that India is just going to be this for secondhand tech, and it's just going to be it's not going to be a good image for India, and also
Mhm.
informed consumers are just going to be like, no, why go with that when I could go with a Samsung which has fresher tech and does not
Right.
like duping us into just being an iPhone fan. There's definitely more of a specs race going on in India where the low end is just blasting through component specifications and seeing where they can race to the top at any given
Gotcha.
time. So it's kind of a difficult thing to see India try to go through with this concession. Now, this is one of a few concessions that Apple's asking for to have a first-party retail presence in India. Another concession that's also asking for is 15 years off of taxes. So there you go.
Of course they are. Of course they are.
Uh,
Good job, Apple. Or why even bother asking for years off of taxes if you can just funnel all of the money that you make out of India and throw it into some shelter? Like, what is it, in Ireland, where they're technically based? 'Cause Apple isn't even an American company anymore, apparently, even though they have their giant campus here in the United States. Why pay taxes here? Because that's silly. You got to be like the president. You're smart. Not paying taxes, that
Ireland
makes you
is
smart.
the capital, is the world's capital of innovation. Like, I don't know why, like, just like, and the potatoes there are great too. I'm sorry, I had to go to it.
That's racist. You're a
Struggle to
horrible
the
bigot.
potatoes.
How dare you? No, okay,
At
so
least there aren't any
uh,
snakes.
but thank you for. Sorry, I'm like coughing through this whole podcast. Sorry, guys, you're gonna be hearing me clear my throat this entire show. No, but thank you for walking me through that. I wasn't entirely sure what the potential issue might have been with, but I kind of understand that from the Indian government's perspective that they're trying to make sure that India doesn't become just sort of a tech waste, an e-waste hub. Going through, I was trying to pull up some stats here. Some of the phone models that are selling really well over the past 6 months in India, the Lenovo Vibe, around 7,000 rupees, Samsung Galaxy J7, Micromax, that's a company we don't have a lot of experience with here in the United States, Xiaomi, Motorola, the Oppo. These are brands that actually are, companies that are on the list of top 5, top 10 manufacturers on the planet, and that have reputations for doing a pretty good job of releasing decent
Yeah, there are
experiences at lower
a
and lower price
whole
points.
bunch of them, and they're competing, they're
Yeah.
struggling, they're fighting, and all these in what would be the equivalent of the sub $200 market, which
Oh,
is the
definitely. Well, and
biggest.
even just looking at like we're actually going to be putting out tomorrow, and after the buzz on the iPhone SE, because I think it's such a fun little Mighty Mouse of a phone, and looking at some of the phones that are really popular in India right now, the iPhone SE, the bang for buck there would just get slaughtered with this kind of phone lineup in India. So I totally appreciate why Apple's trying to break into the Indian market. It's an emerging premium market. Still has a ways to go before they can afford sort of what we take for granted in more Western areas. But God, it would be a great
Well, to
dumping
be fair
ground
to
for
Apple,
all of their
quickly.
old iPhone 5Cs, wouldn't it? I totally get why Apple would want to be able to sell used gear there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not just I'm willing to bet that their intention here is to sell used iPhone 7s as opposed to, going straight forward with an iPhone, like a new iPhone SE, because, you aspire towards an iPhone 7, and if you can get that, working decently and for a better price than what you would have paid,
Yeah.
that's kind of like, it's kind of a feel-good thing. And that's I think it's a smart, savvy move.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to make things in India, you
Well,
have to
and especially
resell
trying
things new.
trying to
You have
make
to
things in
sell something
India, we got a tweet from Ed Modlin. What happened to the $4 smartphone hashtag fake news?
The Freedom Bell, the
Yeah.
Freedom 251, and you can actually start like it was 251 rupees. Uh, there and the whole launch of that thing was just riddled. There was some like a test unit that was demoed out to the media was like from an ODM. It like they just covered up the branding of the ODM with a sticker or something, and that was interesting. So they're trying to deliver phones out now. Like they had like 250,000 phones to deliver. So
Right. So I
and
mean,
they're having
we're
some
gonna just
flash
call
here.
that straight up vaporware then, is what you're saying? Is that it doesn't exist and
Not
all of it
straight
is
up
fake?
vaporware, but it's just been a hot mess. That's more the accurate term.
Well, speaking of a hot mess, that actually takes us to our next story. Is yet again the continuing developments of the. God, I mean, how long is this lawsuit? I don't even care. I don't care. I don't even care how long this lawsuit's been going. But basically, the lawsuit where Apple alleged that Samsung was infringing on copyright and design, and they've been fighting it out in court, and a verdict was levied against Samsung to pay a whole bunch of money, and then the appeals have been focused on just how much money Samsung should pay. Well, now we're moving from the higher end of the court system, and this case is now getting tossed back down to district courts as the Supreme Court wasn't going to make a verdict on this, and district court, what was it? Not the federal appeals courts
Yeah.
also passed on it, and they're passing it back down to Judge Lucy Coe, the San Jose District Court, who has been the person that this entire situation has been argued in front of the entire time. It's like the amount of time they've spent kicking this up and down the judicial branch is now proving to be almost completely a waste of everyone's time, money, and effort, as it goes right back down to the judge that has been sitting over this case since the beginning.
Yeah, I'm sure that the whole, it was this all started out with a $1.05 billion
Mm-hmm.
damages verdict for Apple, and now it's like we don't even know. And part of that is, um, Samsung has been ruled to have infringed upon Apple's, patented materials in taking iPhone material elements and turning them over into Galaxy phones. That was like 2011. So
Yep.
you can imagine the madness going on since then. And in terms of just determining what should be of concern here, like how should the damages be derived, per smartphone unit or per component that was implicated in the case.
Right.
So we're talking, and some of these are tangible, some of these are non-tangible, and that really makes it hard to determine value of worth. Apple claims that Samsung was not able to argue that the infringing article was anything but the finished product, while Samsung claims that the jury that was in the original case should have discussed this concept of an article of manufacture, as set out by the
Right.
Supreme Court ruling that just held in December. So now it's back to San Jose. I lost my heart in San Jose. Was that the song? No, it was in San Francisco.
We'll say it was, just in case we get any kind of like YouTube copyright strikes. That'd be great.
Well, there we go. So it'll be up for if the judge decides that a new trial is needed, as Samsung wants,
Right.
in terms of just debating damages, then it's just
Well, and I think it's hilarious because even from
it's nowhere
kicking it
near
up to
over.
the Supreme Court, I mean, we keep re-asking the same questions without actually trying to determine what the answer to these issues are. So, from your write-up, is you did the write-up on this one? Yeah, you did the write-up on this
Yeah.
one. I love the piece. The question that was left from Justice Sonia Sotomayor's opinion was whether damages should really be determined from every smartphone sold, or, and this would be the trickier element, based on how much the components, both hardware and software, contributed to the value per unit. We have been asking that question since the original trial was put in place, and no one has really come up with a metric to answer that question. But everyone keeps asking it. It's like when we have those like fake debates, like, should we be talking about climate change? You're like, well, why don't we just say yes?
Well,
And then we can determine what we should be discussing about climate instead of having the fake debate. Well, is it for every smartphone, or just like how much did it really affect? I mean, like every single step in the judicial chain, every single appeal has hinged on that question for how damages should be assessed, and no one seems to be able to step up and say, well, this is the metric we should use, and this is how much Samsung really does owe
you have to
Apple.
understand that this has taken over 6 years of legal maneuvering from both sides,
Yeah.
what this means and what that means, and whether this, unlocks a new branch in the trial that, determines whether Apple should argue in this case, and, whether Apple can make a case or Samsung can make a case in that case, and whatnot. So the headaches continued, and they are guaranteed to continue for at least a good long while.
Yeah, and from Ed Modlin, and how much have they spent fighting it? Hashtag stupid tech. If they had only spent that money on battery research.
Uh,
All of the lawyers' fees that have gone into fighting this
uh,
copyright dispute, and we could have, a smartphone that has like a 6-day battery. I guarantee it.
I don't want to have to see a day like that, considering how many lawsuits
Well,
they have to file
and
or
yeah.
fight for those. Events.
No, I mean it's always ugly stuff, and especially for for when we're talking about how companies try and like protect their IP. I understand why there's been such a visceral fight, but after the completion of this trial, to see this appeals process basically completely run amok is really just hilarious. The wrangling and maneuvering is definitely disappointing to try and follow for something that should have been over years ago.
I just want to file amicus briefs and just say,
and we're still talking about like Galaxy S2s and Galaxy S3s, that's what's so hilarious, is that you have to go back and try and do the accounting on a phone line that was end of lifed 3 years ago.
Well, no, my amicus brief would be just 4 words. Y'all give up now.
See, we need to be judges. I was watching People versus OJ Simpson, just thinking like, man, I'd have had so much fun with that. I'd have been pretty much the best judge ever, with my completely limited understanding of the legal process. But something that won't be quite as frustrating to deal with.
Interesting as Judge Ito.
Well, I was going to say is another thing that Samsung is doing that is also full of wrangling and maneuvering and flexibility is a rumor that we're seeing popping up that there might be secret closed door private briefs on a Samsung bendable phone. And I still question exactly what benefit bendable phones will bring, but people seem to be really excited by them. And we'll probably definitely see some form of phone that you can shape or bend or flick or open or stuff that
I can't wait for the first flexible PCB.
Yeah. I love these kinds of mock-ups, like the photo that we found for this story, where it's like you could turn it into a bracelet or into a bookmark or into like a money clip. And you're like, well, where does the battery go?
Well, my 2 cents on that would be, moving on, we have battery talk about the Galaxy S8.
So you're as excited about bendable phones as I am. Awesome. No, let's talk about this, especially after all the fallout from the Note 7. This is a move that I actually appreciate. I know this is going to be frustrating for some people, but we're getting word that the specs on the Galaxy S8 battery are probably going to be a little bit more on the modest side. I think they're going to play this round conservatively just to make sure that everything is above board, that they're manufacturing to scale, safe components, and that for those individual issues, because you cannot have a perfect smartphone run. There will be some phones out there that just have some kind of individual defect or individual problem. And the instant one of those phones pops up, you know it's going to be an insane echo chamber news piece about Samsung phones.
This is going to be back in the news again, guaranteed. And once
Absolutely.
the first, odd explosion happens. And
so even though this is probably going to be a bummer for some people to hear that we're looking at what the a 3,500 milliamp hour battery, is that what?
Yep, 100 milliamp hours less than what was it? The Note,
the S7 Edge.
Or S7 Edge, okay.
Well, it's the same capacity as the Note 7, but it's that 100 milliamp hours capacity smaller than the S7 Edge.
And this is encouraging given that we've seen supposed dimensional diagrams that say that the phone will be a little bit larger in footprint. So,
right.
I mean, if you're, part of that is to accommodate the wraparound screen, but, just having that much extra space, I mean, we're talking mere millimeters here, so it's just that may be enough tolerance.
No, I'll actually say kudos. Like I think from the business side of this conversation, the perception of what the Samsung brand represents, Samsung needs to do everything they possibly can to mitigate any potential issues with this phone. Like they cannot have another problem with this manufacturing line. So even though I would like to see, for how it's on the table behind me, I was reaching for it and trying to start 4 different sentences all at the same time. For how much I love having that 4,000 milliamp hour battery in my Mate 9, I don't think Samsung has the same luxury right now. They need to make sure everything is bulletproof. Everything is as above board, as clean, as safe, as defect free as they possibly can. So to see them taking a step like this, which they probably have the internal space to make these batteries larger, and that they're not going to do that, I think is actually the smart play.
And this is your occasional reminder that we've been talking about graphite flat batteries for the longest time now.
Or
scientists,
graphene.
So what the fuck are you doing?
Well, no. Isn't the problem with graphene that we still haven't found the way to economically manufacture that kind of equipment at scale?
I thought it was just like, rubbing a pencil onto like stickers or something.
No. That that would be a graphite battery, and I think it would perform rather poorly as compared to a graphene battery. Because I'm just tired enough. I have to apologize to the audience. Like I was telling Jules, like I'm on 3 sodas and a cup of coffee right now, and I'm barely staying on my feet. And so, like when you said that, and I took you seriously. Oh no, Jules, not graphite.
Well, it really depends on which 3 sodas and which brand of coffee.
I'm usually faster.
Gotta get quality caffeine,
especially for when you're messing with me like that. And I totally just bought it.
No, I think that was mostly my fault because I was still interchanging graphite and graphene as one and the same. But it's just fun to play.
Yeah, when you have an easy target like me right now, that I got to give you.
Yeah. All right, let's save you. Let's give you some mercy here and talk about HTC and Verizon, and apparently a device in testing over at that network that features the Snapdragon 835 that will not be seen in any other phone other than the Galaxy S8, supposedly because Samsung is hogging all the chips. So I mean, it's a good sign that, HTC is dedicated to the bleeding edge of silicon and all that.
Yeah.
And the president of its smartphones unit said that it is actually, every time there's a new CPU with power that we can leverage, we're always at the forefront doing that. Some people are talking about the timing of our release, but the timing was determined 9 months ago. This is the best CPU out there, and he's referring to the HTC U Ultra that was released last month with a Snapdragon 821. When the next flagship CPU comes, HTC will be one of the very first tier doing that. So, I mean, there's hope. It's not going to be at MWC, but maybe sometime later in spring or early summer.
Well, what I think is interesting about this is seeing this story sort of tied with a carrier. Because we've seen a couple benchmarks on the 835 pop up on different benchmarking apps and services, sort of attached to unknown manufacturers. So to be hearing word that there's some sort of distinct partnership potentially happening with Verizon and with HTC as a manufacturer.
I give this much. I give like an attachment like that as much credit as there was talk about Andy Ruman, starting up his company Essentials. That's the trademark that he's pulled out, and there was a talk about a phone of him. Like he was bringing a phone to CES for private talks with carriers. One of them being Sprint. So it's just, like, HTC could be shopping this out to Sprint, AT&T, all the carriers. Like there are 10 of them in the world. And so it's just like saying Verizon is definitely going to be one that will carry this HTC device, even though we are not sure whether or not it has thumbed up or down on this at all. So it's like,
now,
okay.
Did HTC ever do a Droid? They didn't, right?
Yes, DNA.
That's right. So if Samsung is the only company that can really leverage Qualcomm to a significant degree to buy up all of the Qualcomm, 835 chipsets, I wonder if Verizon has enough market leverage to also go in there and say, like, hey, we're going to build a bunch of droids and HTC is going to be manufacturing them, so we need 835s too. I wonder if Verizon could be a big enough player to move the needle on
it likes
Qualcomm's
to
allocation.
move its body around. It's been doing so with the Samsung in terms of tweaking software and other stuff and commissioning the Droid series, of course, with Motorola. I'm not sure if the interest is there. I mean, they're a bit of ways away from their 5G network coming out. So, like I think it was like 2021 or 2020. That was the timeline. Yeah, it's kind of so making an early push with a big, meaty, freaking Snapdragon 831 10 nanometer meter fabrication, like all those specs and all that branding that we can put on this 5G thing. Like I don't see that. I don't see Verizon, pushing more than what maybe the Motorola.
Obviously, I have
gonna.
Obviously, I have no information on what kind of partnership Verizon and HTC might have, if this is going to be a follow-up to the HTC 10, one of the One branded devices, or if it's going to be one of the U branded devices. But just in thinking about it, like, I wonder if a partnership like that could be strategically leveraged to help move manufacturing on that kind of scale. We've got a couple comments here from Ed Maudlin. HTC's priority needs to be to get back into life, not kissing Verizon's ring, especially in considering the world market and kind of getting HTC on the global stage. Being tied in specifically to one U.S. carrier might not be such a great idea.
I mean, it really depends. I mean, the Moto Z might have done as well as Verizon might have wanted it to, even though Lenovo is claiming a victory. But the Pixel, like, it was manufactured by HTC.
Right.
And it's, Verizon has had the troubles of just keeping that up.
Yeah.
So it's just been, like there's a whole bunch of debate on whether or not these things are beneficial. It's just as much as a roll of the dice as anything.
And so
So
from
yeah.
Panzer Z, Francisco, and Patrick Chea, they're all reminding me of the HTC Droid Incredible, which I
Oh
had
yeah,
forgotten
that's right.
about that phone too. But then from Patrick Che, Sprint has been the only one to get an HTC exclusive so far, or at least recently. What's the biggest thing HTC can do to win you over with this phone? What do you think, Jules? What do you think HTC needs to do to position some kind of future smartphone to continue growing in that regard?
Putting features that are kind of, second nature kind of things. I mean, Sense Touch UI, that concept is video has been floating around since last year, and it still looks amazing to me. And if I don't have to, hassle with moving my fingers too much on what a phablet of a phone, that'd be nice. That'd be great, especially during the winter when I don't have the interest or the
Right.
thumbs or anything to just, maneuver my phone. I think, just being human friendly is kind of nice. And everyone is trying to, leverage big data, artificial intelligence for you. But in terms of, I think HTC has been from leaked materials. This is not, and none of this is official, but
Right.
leaked materials say that HTC is approaching this sort of more human um,
hmm
tone
Well,
to
I
it,
mean,
and
I think there's
it's
definitely still
something
room in the
desired.
market for someone to shake up smart digital assistants, AI, machine learning, and all that fun
Hey,
futuristic
hey, hey,
sounding
Ed
stuff.
Modlin. Ed Modlin. I remember the Harman Kardon 1M8. I owned one. You can go shove it.
Well, just to follow in on your point too, because I agree with you. I think software services definitely need to be at the forefront. It's always nice when our phone hardware gets more powerful, but what are we utilizing that power for? And I think human interface and human interaction, human design is something we definitely need to address over the coming generations of mobile technology. I think these services are ripe for busting out of our phones. We're sort of dipping our toe into things like Snap spectacles and things like that. And I
So
think
wait, wait,
smartphone.
wait, 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 wait. With your point right there. So the story was about HTC and Verizon and the Qualcomm Snapdragon 835.
Right.
We just made Verizon irrelevant to the argument by dismissing it as one of several carriers in the world. And now we're trying to dismiss, and now both of us have been trying to dismiss the Snapdragon 835 as relevant to
No, this
anything.
is actually this is precisely why I think the A35 is so crucial to this story, is because the A35 is
Really?
bringing so one of the things that Qualcomm showed off at
Okay.
CES, and
Yeah.
unfortunately I got to see them, but I didn't get to play with them, was a manufacturer that is building AR spectacles, and they're utilizing the 835. We're seeing the 835 is probably going to become a hallmark for the future bleeding edge of mobile VR, mobile AR, and then all of the new like camera improvements that are coming just from Qualcomm's chipset, not necessarily from like the actual camera sensor and hardware, but from the processing prowess of the 835. So the 835 for smartphone manufacturers, I think a number of companies are going to get blindsided by the fact that people are going to start wanting to peel pieces back off of their phone again. And so you look at things like AR goggles powered by Qualcomm 835s. You look at things like Snapchat spectacles, like we've got all of these different little feelers that are kind of starting to push into this market to see where we can go and what kind of human interface and human interactions we can really have. Smart assistants, when you look at Apple EarPods, I'm not a big fan. I mean, AirPods, I'm not a big fan of the EarPod design, but Apple is again, that's a form of wearable technology, are completely
So
untethered wireless audio pieces that can communicate with your phone in a slightly different way. As soon as
I'm
they're
getting your
tied
train
in
of
with Apple
thought.
Siri, What's that?
But I'm getting your train of thought. But to do that, to do all of that with the 835 on all fronts,
Oh,
on
no, no,
all
no.
the devices.
It's not that the 835 is going to be this cataclysmic shift. It's that the 835 is another step in the direction. And as soon as consumers get more
Okay.
comfortable by beginning that process, I think it's going to happen really quickly. But you got to get them started. It's not like, you can't pull off. This is why Google Glass failed. You can't go from the way that we were using smartphones 2 years ago to people wearing face computers in one generation. That can't happen.
I
But
mean,
we see so
I
many
would.
of these little clues and of these little hints from where companies like Qualcomm are going, that I think that's actually going to help devalue the traditional smartphone app market that we see today. And in fact, like app downloads are kind of on the lower side. We get these big surges, these big excitements over a Pokemon Go, and then we kind of wait for the next service to come out so we can get excited about that too. App installations are actually not growing like they have been in the past. And I think one of the reasons why is because we're all kind of waiting for what's going to be new and what's going to be exciting. And I don't think it's going to come from the normal, I hold this up in front of my face all the time and I touch squares on it and I need to fully occupy my visual and my tactile and my auditory senses to interact with one piece of technology that serves me one thing at a time. I
Yeah.
think we're going to start branching out from that. And I mean that literally. I think we're going to start branching out from that over
I
this
think the
generation.
evaluation methods of seeing this progress track through will be definitely muddied thanks to app subscriptions and in-app subscriptions and all that kind of thing
Oh yeah,
because
no,
you can
no
still
one,
make money.
and obviously no one has any of this figured out. But that's why we're seeing these companies flirting with these other types of interfaces. With it's why it makes sense. It makes sense to me that a company like HTC would be examining some type of assistant. We have so
But
many already,
in
but no one's
terms,
really figured it out to give me that Star Trek computer experience. So there's still plenty of room for someone to come in as a disruptor. If someone can offer me a better experience than what I get with Google Now or with Siri or with Cortana or with Hound or with Bixby or with any other solution, then I'm going to go with what's best. I'm going to go with this is why I still want IBM to make a shift back into consumer. I want Watson on my phone. And what do we see? We see Watson is actually going to be part of the backbone on was it Jackson Hewitt or was it
yeah,
TurboTax?
I'm not
Anyway,
sure.
so for tax
But
season, one of the tax pieces of software is going to be using IBM Watson as part of the backbone for helping people find,
yeah,
what deductions they can claim and what type of paperwork they should file. That
but
is a human Watson interaction that I think could grow to encompass more of the consumer market for any type of service. It doesn't need to be, financial. It doesn't need to be medical. When Watson can draft recipes for a food truck, there's no reason why he couldn't be on my phone telling me how to get directions to a nightclub. Like that could be the next
yeah,
major
yeah.
step.
But in terms of distributing all that computing around, Apple had the thing to, say, okay, so we have this new W1 chip that can, it's Bluetooth, but it's not Bluetooth, and it takes this silicon in order to, oh, we can pair your AirPods up easily with your iPhone 5C or whatever the heck.
Hmm.
So, it's all, for manufacturers to, be interested in this kind of specialized chipsets that can make processes easier to just go through and head off. I think that will be the most important thing, not just services. And there's a front
Well,
end to everything, and there is
no, no,
also a back end.
I no, I totally agree. But that's also what we see Qualcomm doing. So if you're a smartphone
It is,
manufacturer in
but
the
it's
Android ecosystem and you want the top of the line chipset because that's what's going to sell a premium-ish phone, is that you need to have
I
that
think
Qualcomm
that
835 on the label. As part of the thing that you're buying with the 835 are expanded instructions and hardware support for a number of these other types of methods for interacting with data and services. That's part of what makes the 835 a more compelling option, because it's not such a humongous, at least from what we've seen on some of these early speed tests, it's not some radical improvement in just raw processing power. It's that Qualcomm is also looking at where the market could go on a number of these different interaction styles. They don't have any fancy branding like Apple does for their W1 chipset and stuff like that. But Qualcomm is actually working on a number of things that also kind of take that hardware approach there too. It's also why the Kirin is so interesting, where you hear about on-device machine learning for resource allocation. I'm still not completely sold it works like Huawei advertised it, but they are trying to do something AI-ish with managing the resources on your phone. And I think it's only going to grow, and I think it's going to grow rapidly for any company that's not assuming, if any company that thinks 5 years from now we're still going to be touching Square to get app is a company that's going to be dead in 2 years.
I haven't seen a Qualcomm Snapdragon 2100, come into any smartwatch. And what I think is that, maybe designing of those contingent chips. If we're talking about Snapdragon 835s, it's packing more instructions for contingent services and hardware, then why not design a whole, it's not, I haven't seen that yet, and it's still not, it's not coming, and, we haven't seen word of that, because even if, Qualcomm is, if all this is behind, is above our heads, they're still going to talk about this thing. I can tell. We have not been talking about it. Qualcomm has not been talking about it. And I feel like,
Qualcomm has been talking about the 835. You can go to qualcomm.com/product/snapdragon/processor/835 and see the Qualcomm Spectra ISP and the gigabit class connectivity and the hexagon DSP and what is new in the cryo cores and security haven.
It doesn't matter if if the stuff it's connecting to does not listen to, because we're dealing with multiple manufacturers that
and that's exactly what I'm saying, is if a manufacturer is buying an 835 just for the faster clock speeds and is ignoring all of this other stuff, that's a manufacturer that's going to be dead in 2 years. If the manufacturer is not actually trying to move the needle on new interactions with products, this is getting back to hold on. Getting back to Patrick's question. And kind of where you were saying is that you're looking for these new forward-thinking features, these new software elements and things like that. That's something that will keep HTC relevant to the discussion. If it's still just, well, I've got this volume rocker and I've got these hardware keys and the 835 is a faster clock speed, but we're not really trying to do anything else with it, that's a company that's going to be dead in 2 years. That's exactly the point that I'm making. And I think wrapped up in all of this, and this is also something that goes along with where is it? With a comment from Mark Washington, because we've harped on about this in the past too, and this is my personal feeling. It doesn't matter if HTC puts out the most amazing phone ever. If no one knows it exists, then no one's going to buy it. And so Mark Washington tweeted us with the PN Weekly hashtag. One of the things that could be strategic for HTC in the United States is Verizon can help market HTC, because HTC is not a company that has done a very good job of promoting their own products over the last 2 generations.
All right. So to boil it down, I'm saying that Qualcomm has a big trunk, are not developing as far as we can tell, because if I were to see a Qualcomm Snapdragon 2200 in a smartwatch, and it was, it's able to talk with 835, so that the 2200 has a smaller footprint, and it's more economical to have that in a manufacturer's ecosystem of products.
Right.
Then that would make sense to me. What's not making sense is that this is still being billed as a 10 nanometer chip with octa-core and everything like that's the primary thing. And the start, I don't think we're at the starting line yet. I think we've had some false starts here, and I think we've
already started. I think when we look at every other segment of the market, because I don't think this is going to be a change.
If we're truly talking to other people, then we have to talk about IP. We have to talk about
well, that's just it. Is I don't think this is a move that's going to be fully dictated or controlled by the smartphone manufacturers. I think this will, in some small way, be taken out of the manufacturer's hand, because we're really rapidly moving into another era of services over just hardware. that the hardware really isn't moving the desire to buy an expensive smartphone. You could be fine on a mid-ranger from 2 years ago if all you want to do is cover the basics. But if you really want to run around in Pokemon Go, or if you want to run around and Snapchat with your spectacles, if you really want to run around and use your AirPods, then you got to pick up newer hardware. And so that's what I'm saying is these companies, be they app developers, be they accessories manufacturers, or the actual smartphone manufacturers themselves, everyone is flirting with what everyone is flirting with right now is newer interactions and better interactions and more human interactions with data and services. This is the rise of, voice commands and smart assistants. This is the rise of truly wireless earbuds, fitness trackers, peeling pieces back off of the phone. It's not that we just took one step and we can actually track this stuff, is that we're seeing this gradient, and this gradient started a little while ago. I mean, for all of our pontificating on wearable technology, like headphones are wearable technology, pedometers are wearable technology. Now we're creating newer ecosystems with how to interact with this data, with this information, to track this information better. And I think the traditional idea that started with the Palm Pilot of touch square get app is going to die a lot faster than people think it will, especially a number of smartphone manufacturers. As soon as I don't ever have to launch an app, but I can still get Yelp reviews just through voice searches, it's over. Anyone who's still relying on an older app store market is going to be in a world of hurt.
Well, in terms of any given task, the time and confluence efficiencies, not the time and confluence, the time and effort efficiencies need to be at a good confluence in order for that to happen. Yeah. And it takes software and hardware to do that in order to get the maximum of both. And I think that software can do a lot of things, but hardware is able to, is able to be that catalyst for that. And
I don't disagree. And like I said before, is that I don't think that this is going to be just something where we flip a switch and then next week we're all using our phones in a radically different way, because you also have to get consumers on board, and they're very often resistant to change. But I think in much the same way that we saw the radical shift in the consumer market when the original iPhone was launched, that a company had really focused on UI design for consumers as opposed to corporate features for businesses. I think the next shift will happen in a similar fashion, when it's, you don't have to mess around with loading apps and doing all this other stuff and, updating things. Instead, what you do is you talk to someone like you see in the movies, and we finally really do have a good solution for that. That shift will happen rapidly, where consumers make that transition over. I think that is what we'll be seeing. Is we're going to see a lot of companies flirting and experimenting and pushing into newer areas and newer ways of reacting and responding to phones. And then something's going to click, something's going to snap. And then rapidly, we're going to see a number of companies jumping on board this new method of mobile data or mobile cloud or mobile services. And all of our information is going to be sort of ported over there, and we're going to interact with it in a fresh new way. And any company that was still relying on, you load these apps and you do these things and you stare at your phone screen all day is going to get left behind bad.
I'm really focusing on the behind the scenes kind of stuff, because, that's what, leads to these results that you're talking about. But I get the whole picture. The big picture and the small pictures are kind of, it's like one of those collages where you kind of color correct every little bit of it just to make sure.
But I think one of the reasons why I've been so aggressive in talking about the 835 is the Qualcomm 810 was sort of a lost year for the smartphone industry. Yeah. That chipset just did not perform well. And I feel like the 820 was really a recovery year. And now we're hopefully going to be seeing the benefits of that recovery into something that actually will move the needle more aggressively. Like I was saying, the second I saw 835 in a pair of AR goggles, like that was something we couldn't have done at all with the 810. That just ran too hot, was too power inefficient, and too performance inconsistent. And the 820 maybe, but then the 835 has been built around the idea of it not just being in phones. of, the manufacturer of that chipset is looking for other things that they can put this chipset in. No one has the right solution yet, but they're searching. No one was searching for what else you could do with the 810. Most manufacturers were saying, nah, give me the 808. This is not something that we've had recently. Was the confidence in the flexibility of that kind of mobile computing power.
Pandrazy mentions Windows on ARM with the Snapdragon 835, and I would say that Windows poses many more like muscle tasks, like Photoshop, like video editing, like all that stuff.
We need to see a little bit more progress there too.
So in terms of the whole picture, like those x86 apps are going to be great. But the future. The visionaries of Juan Carlos Bagnell and Jules Wong will have to wait a little while. All right, we've been waiting a little bit too long on this subject. Let's see if we can move on to the mainland from Taiwan and talk about how the Google Play Store has never existed there and probably might never exist there. So, congratulations. This is a story that really should be here.
Sorry. Your final assessment there kind of took me by surprise.
We've been talking about this for too long.
No. It's just okay. So NetEase holds licenses for MMOs of Blizzard franchises. So Google is trying to work with NetEase to try and bring what will essentially be a heavily censored version of the Google Play Store for China. I think it's inevitable. It's just working out all of the business particulars at this point, right? Like at some point, Google is going to operate as a store in China.
I'm not really looking forward to this unless there is some form of Google Play services that makes official Android devices viable in the country. And when we're talking about $1 billion plus, how much revenue that Google can derive from these people, in terms of cloud services, you're competing with Alibaba and Tencent and all the other players in China right now, as well as the advanced the advanced stuff that happens on WeChat. I'm gonna go and pay for my meal, and I'm gonna head to the restaurant and do everything from these one app things. Like that's
right.
The whole, it's like a different ball game over there. So they need the services as well as the Play Store. So
you don't think that there's any amount of censoring that will actually make the Chinese government move on allowing Google to do business there then?
I mean, there is, but I don't. I mean, we've seen Apple, some of its iTunes movies and books have been banned. Like the stores were taken off for a couple of days before because of the censorship office said that this was not allowed. So I don't know. It's just there has to be some point where Google's willing to compromise, but that point, is subject to moving, and I'm not sure how far they're willing to move.
Gotcha. Well, what's not moving right now is Mozilla. It's a very inelegant transition into our next story. We've got Mozilla cutting 50 jobs.
I mean, they're moving around those jobs.
Well, yeah, I guess you could say they're moving them on out.
Well, some of them are
moving them on up.
Well, some of them are reapplying at different units, but this nonprofit organization is canceling and cutting off its connected devices unit in favor of Internet of Things. Firefox OS died in May of last year, and that was capping off a couple of years of some devices, and then development not really working out. Third parties didn't really clutch onto this, so they wanted to make it more open, and then that didn't work, so it just died.
And no one really noticed, so they're probably not wrong to be reallocating resources. I thought what was interesting is just sort of the notion that they might be trying to move Firefox OS into more of an IoT solution. Again, something that I think there's still a little wiggle room in how we're connecting devices for a company to come in and actually what I think that there's room to really do in terms of IoT, because I really hate everything being lumped under this like marketing buzz term Internet of Things. But one of the things that I think is the most glaring right now is the security situation when it comes to web connected devices. You know, when the tiny little chipset in a smart thermostat can be hacked and can be exploited for denial of service attacks, I think there's room for another company to come in and say, you know, we've got a framework, or we've got security protocols, or we've got an update system. We've got pieces that can be utilized to make these devices more secure, more reliable, to make updating them more feasible or more cost effective. And I think that actually, I mean, it's not going to be the biggest benefit for consumers. Like, that's just the stuff that people don't think is very sexy. But I think that could be huge for the overall market for other companies that are looking to try and break into IoT.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of patching up the security, I mean, I think that's going to come with time, and it's going to be done before we even know, like it comes into widespread notice. But that's my hope. I mean, Mozilla definitely has the right idea of going into it and making sure that there are some open source standards,
Yeah.
so that everyone's on a level playing field. But it's this nebulous thing that a lot of us in the tech media just aren't even, we know that it turns up our temperature when we want it to, and then
Right.
like that, when we get into the nitty gritty of it, it just seems a little bit too like we associate things with 5G, like 5G, which had like a new logo that comes from like the 80s or something. And it just,
Oh, but Ed Modlin said he liked the new logo.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe he's just
Well,
all fun and retro.
maybe. Old styles, old
Well,
school.
we'll see how that goes. He has
Yeah,
a couple comments about just the United States and the current state of our data connectivity, and we could stand to be a bit more progressive there.
miserable,
Um,
miserable.
I don't. Yeah.
It's
We.
sad.
I was gonna
We have
say,
the best LTE in the whole world.
like
It's very
the little check mark on your school report card needs improvement or something like that.
South Korea should be ashamed. We're going to build a wall around them.
Whoa, whoa, hey now,
We have the best
that's
LTE in the world. Sad.
sad. It's so basically, I think what we need to do is have the Pocketnow drinking game of who can race to the word sad in the most Trump-like fashion per tweet.
Yeah. Trump joke generator should be our, like,
Right,
we should have
but
that
it's got
on
to be
all the
like a
time.
back and forth to see who can like most organically get to the end of the thought of the incoherent string of run-on sentences to
I
get
have
to
never been
sad.
able to tie the word organic to the word Trump.
Well, something that's not super organic, but we can still talk about. You're gonna have to take the lead on this. I read this story 3 times, and I still don't get WTF is going on. But apparently, there's going to
So
be a
yeah,
Valentine's edition of a phone that's not even officially released yet. Is that what's going on?
yeah, a lot of I don't get why Valentine's Day is even a thing for smartphone
Oh,
manufacturers, because
you cold-hearted cynic, you. Everybody should participate in the glory and splendor which is Valentine's Day.
well, apparently, the Redmi Note 4X, Redmi is the budget operations of Xiaomi's smartphones, is going to come out on the Valentine's Day. So that's Monday, I think. If I'm doing no, wait, that's Tuesday,
Hmm.
and that's going to be fun. And apparently, they announced they were teasing this, and with some promos on Weibo, and have finally announced that there's going to be a Hatsune Miku version of the Redmi Note 4X. Now, the Note 4X itself is not a spectacular, device to talk about in its own right, but there's the fact that there is a Japanese. All right, so let me get this right. So it's an anime-style mascot of an artificial voice set in a Japanese singing compositor program called Vocaloid. So,
Oh, I know about Vocaloid. Yeah.
you know about Vocaloid? You know
Yeah, I
about
do.
the
So,
big
yeah, so there was this big fear that Vocaloid
the
was going to
big
take over, like,
concerts in Los
well,
Angeles and Chicago and all, and
no,
we
actually,
could
what's
we
hilarious
could
is when Vocaloid first broke and we saw the early demos, I was still working mostly in commercial casting, and it was the one of these major turning points in the conversation. Like, oh no, computers will take over all of our voiceover jobs because of software like Vocaloid. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, please continue with this odd-looking
Ooh,
phone box with a pretty anime character on the cover of it.
yeah, phone box with some accessories and apparently a limited number, and it's available on Valentine's Day because you wanna have your cute anime girl to hold next to while you're in bed. You're single and you've just gotten your takeout, and it's just like it's fun, it's fun, it's nice.
And that's I guess that's all we need to say about
I,
that.
re- I
And
don't like painting weeaboos in that kind of light like anyone else, like everyone else. But it's just that's the only thing that we can go to. We can't really. It's like I don't know.
well,
I feel bad.
I'm even just like I was sort of curious. Like again, it's one of the trying things is lately we've been trying to reach out to companies like Xiaomi because we really like to be talking about their phones more. And wouldn't it just be the kicker if that's the first phone we got to review from them in a while?
I
Was
mean,
the
I might be participating in this whole show in this rodeo. Who knows? I'm close enough to be able to get a unit, maybe.
well, and from
Maybe it'll be
Panzer Z
flexible.
using the PN Weekly hashtag, Jules, didn't you know the ultimate form of love is to show that you are going into debt for someone else?
With
See,
for your waifu,
for your waifu, exactly. And you need the matching pillow, right?
you need the
That
what's the
thing.
word? Dakimakura. Yeah.
It's
You
just
can tell that I've been tainted by this culture a fair bit. So I apologize in advance.
we don't intend to be we really didn't intend to be this insulting or this flip about what someone else's predilections towards artificial anime characters are. So
Google Now Launcher.
is one of the stories we're going to be talking about. Just a couple, a quick video redo, redux, I guess I should say. We posted a couple
Remix.
videos. We we've been spending some time on just some other editorial stuff, and a video that tracked way better than I thought it was. Thought it was going to is the end of lifing of the Google Now launcher. And we got some phenomenal commentary and some great comments and discussion from people on that on our YouTube channel, talking about the launchers that they like to use, the software that they've been hoping to replace it with. A lot of people who were just sort of plain upset that Google Now Launcher was going to be removed from the Play Store without an official replacement from Google. I think a lot of people are of the mind that we'll probably see some form of the Pixel launcher available for more devices at some point. Probably not right away. Google seems to be holding that kind of stuff for the Pixel right now, like Google Assistant being sort of locked in like that. But at some point, I think we're all of the mind that we'll eventually see, because you can already sideload the Pixel launcher onto
Yeah,
another phone, and it seems to work
you
pretty
can.
well on a number of phones. So I don't think it's unrealistic to think that eventually we'll get Pixel Launcher as a replacement for the Google Now Launcher. But for me, the biggest aspect of the story was the frustration of seeing Google kill something, a really great free first-party solution for customizing your phone, without a proper replacement in place. And it kind of just reinforced why Nova Launcher is absolutely the best launcher ever made, that everyone should just use that instead.
No, I was more included in this because I've been seeing all the comments, and about I don't know 4 out of 5 of them, they're all about Nova Launcher, or there's that little subset that's like Eevee Launcher or Action 3, or so yeah,
Yeah.
that's that's been I don't know. I suggested in a kind of a editorial thing that I sent to you.
Yeah.
What did I suggest? Wait. Okay, so
Well, but also just like
like
reasons why
what?
people maybe you shouldn't just jump right on the Nova bandwagon, and I
Yeah,
think there's definitely some merit to that. There are a number of
it's a
really great
rote kind of
launchers
thing.
out there, and there is still just this notion that with you being able to sideload the Pixel launcher, that hopefully we'll very soon see a true first party Pixel launcher. But from my own personal experiences, and again, this is going to sound like I'm shooting a commercial here for Nova Launcher. We finally did get my grandmother an Android phone. She's going with an Idol. Just like the speakers, the screen was nice. It seemed like the right fit, the right price. And we ended up swapping the Idol's launcher with Nova, simply because we could really easily customize and then lock the home screen to play in place, so that if she does something funky or lingers, long presses on an app, something weird doesn't happen, that everything stays where it should. And that actually became a pretty important feature for us when we were customizing her phone, trying to get her set up. And I was thinking back to it, it's like, that's not really something I could have done on the Google Now launcher. Like, that there was a reason why we decided to go with Nova over Google Now. And for the same token, why we would have gone with Nova over any kind of Pixel launcher for her. So again, that's a very specific, limited, that's a sample size of one individual there. But it kind of did reinforce why I liked the customization of Nova Launcher, why I've been a fan of like Action Launcher in the past. Just the options that you have to tinker. I know that's not really what we think consumers want. We kind of start treating consumers as if they can only handle doing things in one specific way. You have to tell them how to do everything. But I do think that there is some value or some merit still to what a company like, or what a launcher like Nova or Action can bring to the table.
Yeah. I've been myself have been sideloading the Pixel launcher, and that's post Nova launcher. So, I mean, I was mostly just trying to put in as much, stuff as I could in the real estate I had. So,
Right.
yeah, I think it's just the Pixel launcher is a much better balance of just being able to do that, and also, not having to do. I don't know. The app drawer icon for me was kind of like a some sort. I like the swipe gesture better. So, and
Yeah, do that.
there's like a freaking applet on the Google Play Store that's like supposed to add on the app drawer icon. I'm like, dude, what the heck?
But you can do that on Nova.
You can definitely do. Last time I checked, it was kind of buggy on my HTC
Oh,
10.
okay.
I think we have
No,
a head.
I
I think
mean,
we have a headshot of
it,
that.
it
Or
it worked fine on my so the reason why we did that and why Nova became important over using Google Now was so that when we gave her the phone, we set it up so that it would be just like her iPad, but vertically instead of horizontal. So all
uh,
she has to do is swipe up from the bottom to get to the app screen that we sort of customized with her most important stuff. And then she swipes up and then all the rest of her apps there. So it's just like a vertical version of what she does on her iPad, because she's pretty comfortable using her iPad.
yeah.
And that we could lock all of that in place so she couldn't accidentally change any of it. This is a point that I think is maybe one of the biggest sticking points we saw in the comments, was the feed. If you really like the Google feed, and this comes from Panzer Z, PN Weekly, as long as Google has opened up the swipe to Google Feed API, the loss of the Gnow launcher isn't too much of a problem. And that is something that doesn't
Yeah,
work.
that is in a this library as the
Yeah.
new term.
Well, if you use AOSP, I don't know if that's going to work with Action Launcher or with Nova the way that it currently works now. So what I have to do on Nova Launcher is I do a 2-finger swipe up, and that launches my feed. I don't know that Nova can utilize a leftmost swipe. So if all your home screens were in a row, on Google Now Launcher, you swipe all the way to the leftmost side, and that's where your feed lives. That always kind of bugged me because I just liked having very simple home screen layout, but I still kind of like the feed. So on Nova Launcher, I've set it so that you do a 2-finger swipe up from the bottom, and the feed pops into place from there. And I kind of like that, but I don't know that you'll be able to have the same kind of organizational layout using a third-party launcher if you still want to use the Google feed.
Yeah,
You will have to change some of that stuff.
I myself get the preference for it's just, it's more something that you can be in mind of instead of having to remember to, double swipe
Right.
to access it. If you really want it, then you can just press home and then swipe left. Like, I don't know, I think that's more of an easier access, but
I don't know. I mean, as you're saying, is all I have to do is push home and swipe up. It's like the same thing. So
with 2 fingers. I mean, I don't use my fingers are large as they already are, and my dexterity is like is second from the worst. So
second from in all of humanity, we've got a bunch of
7
people.
billion and counting.
We've got like Panzer Z and Ed Modlin ending all of their tweets with sad, or Patrick Che also ended sad too. I love it. I want to see more of that. It makes me laugh. One of the other comments, I guess my camera just flaked out on me. I don't know. Can you guys still see my video?
You're a breathing ball to me. So I mean, whatever. It's just we got Slate. We can use that. We can show that
This
off.
is ridiculous. As this entire vehicle
Thanks,
just
Google.
flying off the wheels. The other major story that we posted in video that actually got a lot of traction to was sort of another pair of companies caught rigging benchmarks. And I had to posit this as the question. So we did a news piece on Cheddar, and Cheddar is they bill themselves as the CNBC for millennials. But they're trying to be a legit news organization. They're broadcasting from the New York Stock Exchange. So we did a live broadcast with them talking about this story. They wanted to talk about this story.
Doing admirable work, yeah.
And I even did the broadcast without a hat. So you can see me completely hatless for the first time in a long time on camera. But we wanted to kind of follow that story up too, because I had to ask the question of our audience, does this something that we should start being concerned with as some form of false advertising? If you cheat a benchmark or if you juice a benchmark, you're displaying performance numbers that consumers typically won't really have access to in their own daily use. And so it's this thing, you put in a special little piece of extra software, and when the phone detects a benchmark's being run, it overcranks everything to try and get the best possible score. But you don't necessarily get to tap into that kind of chipset power when you're using the phone. So what do you think, Jules? Is this something that we should be hammering companies on when we find this? Should we be hammering them more? Is this grounds for a class action lawsuit? If someone's making a purchasing decision on some of these reviews and some of these benchmarking scores, how upset do they really have a right to be that their phone doesn't really perform as reviewed? Not necessarily as advertised, but as reviewed.
I'd rather sidestep the whole controversy and just because, like, in terms of like it's a long-standing problem, and it's something that it doesn't it's not very representative of how people in the comments have been saying. It's I use my phone, like, how does it do daily, or how can it keep up? How can I expect, how long can I expect this, the average performance to last?
Right.
And we have pretty much no empirical way. Like, there isn't really a benchmark that can do that,
Right,
and project in like a one single thing, as opposed to having a benchmark run on a phone for the duration of 2 years. So I think that is going to be the biggest problem in terms, like, there is no benchmark for finding decay rates, or accounting for jostling of the silicon, or just jostling of the wires, and there's a little crack in the PCB board, and that's gonna tear everything apart.
Right.
Basically, we don't have any of that. And that is something I feel like maybe Gamebench is able to, do the best at tracking this kind of that app. Basically just logs performance metrics while you're playing games.
Right.
So in terms of empirical, that's as empirical as you're going to get. But it's, again, we don't have, no one's providing the numbers that we want, and I think that's the bigger problem in all this.
Well, and so for me, and this is me personally, and I still would love to see other people's thoughts on, is the bad word of mouth that a company is apt to garner? Because the people who would care about benchmarking scores are the same people who would viscerally chew up a company for cheating benchmarks. Your average consumer probably isn't going to pay that much attention. They might hear, it kind of might make it into some sort of general news broadcast. Like we were broadcasting on a business news station to talk about this story. So, I mean, it will filter out there. But for the people who are actually trying to really dig into reviews or use this as purchasing information, or to help them make a purchasing decision, so you feel like the bad word of mouth is probably adequate, that this probably isn't something we'd need to look at any kind of legal recourse.
No, but it definitely, like when it comes to the whole imaging of the
Right.
There's definitely lots of grief to be thrown around, but I don't think you can do much about it.
Well, so and because Panzerz tweeted me this earlier too, but he reminded me, he sent this back in on the PN Weekly hashtag. Like I said to some gadget guy, ask VW how okay it is to have special conditional performance configurations for passing tests. And it's not exactly the same. We're not talking about like air purity when we're talking about smartphones, but I don't know, that metaphor resonates with me, man. I mean, I should say that analogy resonates with me a lot, because I already have so little faith in synthetic benchmarks for being any kind of actual description of your daily lifestyle computing, but we still do them because it's kind of a way to help quantify performance from phone to phone to phone. I don't spend a lot of time on them, though. I'm not sitting here and trying to catalog a ton of different benchmarks. And it's also why even for like battery benchmarking or battery testing, I run a very limited, charge recharge kind of test. I don't even try and bother with screen on time because my daily usage doesn't really reflect well for screen on time metrics. But you bring it up like that and you're like, if there is a special piece of software that the manufacturer has put on a phone to change the performance characteristics of a device under certain conditions, that to me shows that the company is acting with forethought. They're acting with forethought to misrepresent how their product tests versus what the consumer is apt to actually experience. And so that to me makes this feel tawdry. This makes it feel dirty.
Yeah.
Because it's like they're doing something. It's not just like, oh, well, this benchmark is maxing out the phone's capabilities like a benchmark should. It's the phone is kicking it into a turbo mode that you are not allowed to use as the consumer, but the phone can use just for this one kind of situation. And that makes me cranky. Like I said in the video, and this is spoilers for the actual editorial that we posted, but I want a turbo button. I want like my NOS, I want to kick that turbo into gear. And, like if I know that, because I'm a big boy, I know that my battery life is going to plummet, but I want that phone to run as powerful as it possibly can. I should have access to that same high performance mode that they use for benchmarks.
Yeah. I you know what? In terms of that, I can agree with. That's as far as I can go, really, because.
Well, that's actually the one. I mean, I want to keep this discussion going because, like I said, when we posted the initial video, I think we posted it a couple days ago, just sort of bringing up the story. in bringing up that question, that really did get some phenomenal replies. And again, for some of these topics that we've been talking about recently on the Pocketnow YouTube channel and Pocketnow.com, we were talking about smartphone addiction. We had that amazing interview with Dr. Fong. We were talking about some of the political ramifications of some of these moves. And then we started talking about, benchmark rigging. I've been finding like the discussion that people are wanting to get into on YouTube has grown up so much more over these last couple of years. And so going through the comment section on those videos, which used to be kind of a chore for me, was a joy. Was going through and replying to people bringing up other points. Panzer Z and on Twitter, bringing up that comparison to the VW emissions cheating scandal. I mean, like so many just really great points. And so I'd like to kind of keep that discussion going. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts on how serious should we be taking this stuff? And even if we're not taking it seriously, does it start to veer into the territory of false advertising or misrepresenting what the product is capable of? And if that's true, at some point, do we have to ask if some type of legal response or class action lawsuit response is appropriate for something that probably doesn't affect the vast majority of consumers, but is still material out there, which is misrepresenting something that you are apt to spend a lot of money and time on?
Well, I mean, you did bring up good points in terms of, being able to launch the camera. And I think a case can be made that if you're, shooting a critical moment and your processor goes out on you and starts skipping frames,
yeah,
right, that can be crucial stuff. That can be evidence to multiple cases in terms of something going on in the video and then going on with the phone too. So I mean, if that's a legal test that anyone wants to muster, fine muster to, then I don't know. You got your test bed right there.
Well, I think it's about time we wrap the show up, but we do want to get to this email. I'm so happy that you thought this email was fun too. So I read this email to my wife, and I don't know that she's ever laughed so hard at a techie email question before. But this comes courtesy of Travis, and Travis writes, "Hey guys, normally if I were in the market for a phone this time of year, I'd wait until the next round of phones launch after MWC. I was planning on getting the next Galaxy. However, I don't want a stupid big phone with a stupid big screen that has a stupid aspect ratio and stupid bezels that will make gripping the phone stupid and require the stupid new stupid fingerprint scanner position. Should I just get the Galaxy S7? I'm on Verizon, so I'm kind of stuck with their small selection. Help, I need an adult. P.S. If the leaked images are real, the Galaxy S8 looks stupid."
If you think that way, then take advantage of these Valentine's Day deals and start making out with that little fingerprint button.
So I don't know, but I mean, like, so I think the Galaxy S7 is still a perfectly reasonable option in this day and age. I think it'll age well. I don't think we're going to have the same issues that we did with how phones powered by the Qualcomm 810 are aging. I think the 820 phones will age a little bit more gracefully than 2015 phones, flagship phones have.
Anything will age gracefully depending on the way you use it.
No, but I just mean, like, for however you would use it. There's a little bit more likelihood that this phone just won't like completely drop off, and we won't see sort of the fall off that we've seen.
Fabrication's advanced enough to not fall apart. Right.
Like a year later, no one was saying like, "Oh man, I really have to get an LG Flex 2." Like the perception of that chipset really wrecked that one phone in particular. But I also think, if you're feeling this way about the Galaxy S8, and the Galaxy S7 is an almost all glass phone, and you're also going to run into issues, even if you have the flat front Galaxy S7 and not the S7 Edge, that it's impossible to find a good glass screen protector that actually does line up with the slight curve of the glass on the edges of the screen, that maybe it's even just time to consider another manufacturer. Like, if you're feeling this kind of ire with Samsung, maybe I don't know, examine, because Verizon doesn't have you're right, Verizon doesn't have the largest selection. You can't just bring another phone to Verizon, but towards the end of this year, as opposed to a phone from the beginning of 2016, maybe even a Pixel. Maybe.
I mean, if he doesn't like the whole concept of back-mounted fingerprint sensors, then HTC 10, like
Well,
that's also
but
very
the
respectable.
thing I will say, because I'm a huge fan of the rear-mounted fingerprint sensor, but I also kind of agree with him that a rear-mounted fingerprint sensor which is not centered under the camera module, I think is kind of stupid.
Okay, yeah,
Like
that is fair.
it's that, on my Pixel, because I have the Pixel XL, and then it lines up almost perfectly with where my finger naturally rests and just sort of holding the back of the phone. So I'm kinder in that regard, but I agree with him. Like, you move that fingerprint sensor to be at the same height as the camera and off center means that it works well in one hand and it will work tragically in the other. And that you're going to be constantly smudging up your camera sensor. And that, for me being the smartphone camera snob, that's just not going to happen. That's just terrible.
Sad.
It's sad. Shit.
Okay.
So for any other recommendations, I don't know, drop us a comment on this video. Maybe you guys can help Travis out. Like I said, I think the S7 is still a fine option, but maybe it's just time to consider another manufacturer. That would be would be my advice.
Moto Z not bad.
Yeah.
I'm looking at.
I don't know. I actually was kind of sad to give up the Z Force. Great battery life, the shatter resistant screen, good build quality, a competitive camera. I don't think the camera is as good as what you would get on a Galaxy, but the rest of the phone was pretty solid makeup. It is a little bit bigger. So if you're thinking that even an S7 Edge is going to be too big, then that's why I was kind of pointing towards the Pixel. But the Moto Z Force was a fun phone to use for the time that I had it, even minus any of the Moto mods. Although you get a Z Force and you slap on a battery Moto mod and you've got battery for days. It was pretty great.
Well, the Galaxy S7 is probably on sale with those other Valentine's Day.
Yeah, that's true. You can probably get a good deal on those
stuffs, but which is why I say go for it right now. I still think the HTC 10 is a good alternative. Even though it's full price, but
again, because now you're talking about different trade-offs, so you don't get the same sort of water resistance, but I think the phone casing's a bit more durable, and you get much better audio, like significantly better headphone and speaker performance on the HTC 10 than what you would get on a Galaxy S7.
Yep. I believe there was one more that was unsigned that I didn't pass along to you, or maybe I did. I think it was,
I don't have another one in my email. I can try and pull up the Pocketnow email.
Yeah, let's do that because I want to be able to address the question, even though it was unsigned. It was, I felt it was important enough to include in this conversation.
Was it the PN Weekly 237?
No, it was not.
Listener Q&A.
Yeah, it may have been.
Oh, hold on. What is it? With the lack of the ultrasonic?
And that is the lack of the lack of an ultrasonic fingerprint sensor on the S8 be a deal breaker for you, and especially given its back position too, given the price.
So again, I get really nervous about questions like this because I don't think anyone should be basing any kind of purchasing decision off of one feature unless that's your killer feature. So fingerprint sensors are not my killer feature. I get cranky about front-mounted home button fingerprint sensors. I just don't like them, but it doesn't necessarily prevent me from using the phone. So that's not something that would prevent me from picking up and using a phone with a terrible camera, or a phone which, has poor build quality, or a phone that has terrible headphone audio. That's a phone that I leave at home, that I don't spend a lot of time with. So I don't think that people are going to be, I think there is going to be some culture shock.
What's a deal breaker is if we move over to, on-screen fingerprint sensing tech, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That is absolutely something that will harm a company's brand and reputation.
That's a point of no return.
I just think that this is going to be a generation with a little culture shock where Samsung fans have always understood a hardware home button and capacitive navigation keys, a navigation back button, a capacitive back button, a capacitive multitasking button. So I'll be curious to see how Samsung fans approach the Galaxy S8 in that regard. But I don't think that this is going to be something that really prevents people from picking up the phone, in my opinion. Indeed. Well, that music can only mean one thing, and that's that this episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where you can find Jules as @PointJules, and I'm humbly @SomeGadgetGuy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. We're basically everywhere. And shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology, and by dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever else podcast reviews can be left. Once again, we want to thank all the people who were asking us phenomenal questions during the broadcast using the PN Weekly hashtag and sending in emails at podcast@pocketnow.com. Because ultimately, there would not be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness. So make sure you tune back in. Happy Valentine's Day.